I will tell you about this important event, connected with the actualization among them of his sacred individual, the notion about which the contemporary favourites of yours define by the words, the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Your acquaintance with this fact will be another example for you for enlightening you about the sense and essential significance of the sacred sacrament al-Misnushinu. And in addition, you will also have a clear example of what I've already told, how, thanks only to the strange heresy in their general psyche called wiseacring, the sense of even those crumbs collected from bits here and there into one whole, spoken and indicated to them by the genuine sacred individuals intentionally actualized among them from above, were already so distorted by the first generation of the contemporaries of the given sacred individuals, that from all what they call religious teachings, information reached the beings of subsequent generations, suitable perhaps only for the inventing of what are called children's fairy tales. The point is that when this sacred individual, Jesus Christ, was actualized in the planetary body of a terrestrial free-brain being, and when afterwards he had to be separated from his exterior planetary coating, then just this same sacred process, al-Musnushino, was also produced on his body Kesjan by certain terrestrial free-brain beings in order to have the possibility, in view of the violent interruption of his planetary existence, of continuing to communicate with his divine reason, and of obtaining in this way the information about certain cosmic truths and certain instructions for the future which he did not finish giving them. The information concerning this great event was actually noted by certain participants in the performance of this sacred process, and was intentionally related for a definite purpose to the ordinary beings around them. And so, my boy, in consequence of the fact that that period of time coincided with that particularly sharp functioning, which I already once mentioned, of the strange reason of these free-brain beings pleasing to you, in the sense of the periodic ekbarzibazia, which had long been an inherent need for them, to lead into error beings around them similar to themselves, at which period many of them strove to be called learned, of course of new format, and also on account of the fact that at that time there were many such beings among the mentioned ordinary beings around them. Then they inserted for transmission to subsequent generations in most of the notes and expressions of these stories of the witnesses about this sacred process such absurdities that in addition to this indubitable information that Jesus Christ was crucified on a cross, and that after the crucifixion he was buried, they also proved just as convincingly that after his crucifixion and burial, Jesus Christ was resurrected and continued to exist among them, and to teach this and that, and only afterwards did he raise himself with his planetary body to heaven. The result of this kind of, in the objective sense, criminal wiseacring of theirs, was that in the beings of subsequent generations, genuine faith in all this divine and uniquely accomplished teaching of salvation of the all-loving Jesus Christ was totally destroyed. These absurdities, which were written down, began gradually to engender in the presence of certain of the beings of subsequent generations the impulse of doubt, not only concerning what I have just said, but also doubt relating in general to all the real information and accurate instructions and explanations of this sacred individual, intentionally actualized among them from above. The data, however, for the doubt of these mentioned certain terrestrial free-brain beings of subsequent generations began to be crystallized and became an inalienable part of their common presences, chiefly because even in them, in spite of the process inherent in them of almost automatic existence, yet nevertheless during a long period of time, many of their centuries, they gradually acquired from this automatic crystallizing data for a more or less correct instinctive sensing of certain cosmic truths, as for instance concerning the indubitable truth that if the process of the sacred Razkuanu occurs to any being, or as they say, if someone dies and is moreover buried, then this being will never exist again, nor furthermore will he ever speak or teach again. And so those of these unfortunates, in whom in short there still continued to proceed very slightly the functioning of being mentation according to the law of sane logic, and who had not at all accepted such illogical and unusual incoherencies, ultimately lost all faith in any truth whatsoever, really given and explained by this sacred individual, Jesus Christ. And as regards the remaining terrestrial free-brain beings, who, by the way, in general representing themselves the majority, then they become unusually transformed at the corresponding age owing to many causes, but chiefly because already from the earliest years of their existence it became proper to them to occupy themselves with what is called more dorton, into what are called psychopaths, accept blindly, literally, and word for word, entirely without any being logical mentation. All these fantastic absurdities which reach them, and a kind of special peculiar faith in all this religious teaching, becomes automatically formed in them as if represented in itself the totality of all the truths connected with and related to just this sacred individual Jesus Christ, who was indeed intentionally actualized among them from above. The information about what is called the Lord's Supper, given in the noted totality, still existing today among your contemporary favourites, representing, as it were, the real accurate history of this sacred individual, and which is called by them the Holy Writ, was nothing else but a preparation for the great sacrament Almus Nushinu on the body Keshjan of Saint Jesus Christ. It is interesting to notice that even in this totality notated from bits here and there, which your favourites call the Holy Writ, there are many precise words and even whole phrases uttered at that Lord's Supper by the Saint Jesus Christ himself, as well as by those directly initiated by him, who in this same Holy Script are called disciples or apostles, and which words and phrases your favourites, particularly the contemporary ones, also understand, as always and everything, only literally, without any awareness of the inner meaning put into them. And such a nonsensical literal understanding proceeds in them, of course, always owing to the fact that they have entirely ceased to produce in their common presences part dog duty, which should be actualized by being efforts, which in their turn alone crystallize in the free-brain being's data for the capacity of genuinely being pondering. That is why, my boy, in the given case also, they could not ponder at least only about the fact that when this sacred individual Jesus Christ was actualized among them, and when this same existing holy writ of theirs was compiled, so many definite words were not used by beings similar to those compilers as are used at the present time. They do not consider that at that period, being mentation among the beings of this planet was still nearer to that normal mentation, which in general is proper to present among free-brain beings, and that at that time the transmission of ideas and thoughts was, in consequence, still what is called pod omniscientian, or, as it is still otherwise said, allegorical. In other words, in order to explain to themselves, or to any others, some act or other, the free-brain beings of the planet Earth then refer to the understanding of similar acts which had already formerly occurred among them. But meanwhile, this also now proceeds in them according to the principle called chain on isinorianus. And this first proceeded there because, thanks as always to the same abnormally established conditions of ordinary existence, their being mentation began to proceed without any participation of the functioning of their what are called localizations of feeling, or according to their terminology, feeling centre, chiefly in consequence of which this mentation of theirs finally became automatized. And hence, during all this time, in order to have the possibility of even approximately making clear to themselves or explaining anything to anyone, they were themselves automatically compelled and continue to be compelled to invent very many almost non-significant names for things and also words for ideas, great and small, and therefore the process of their mentation began little by little to proceed, as I have already said, according to the principle chain on is ionis. And it is just with this mentation of theirs that your contemporary favourites try to decipher and to understand a text written still in the Simonicean manner for the mentation of beings contemporary with the divine Jesus Christ. And so, my boy, it is necessary to explain to you about a certain fact, in the highest degree absurd and in the objective sense blasphemous, for a greater clarification of the real nothingness of this holy writ, still existing today among your favourites, which opprobrious became particularly widely spread after their last process of reciprocal destruction, and in which, as you already surmise, there is everything you please, except in reality and truth. I will inform you, namely, concerning what is said in this contemporary holy writ, which has, as it were, reached them in an unchanged form, about the chief, most reasonable, and most devoted of all the beings, directly initiated by this sacred individual, or as they would say, about one of his apostles. This devoted and favourite apostle, initiated by Jesus Christ himself, was called Judas. According to the present version of this holy writ, everyone who wishes to draw on the true knowledge will acquire such a conviction, which will also be fixed in his essence, that this same Judas was the basis of beings conceivable, and that he was a conscienceless, double-faced, treacherous traitor. But in fact, this Judas was not only the most faithful and devoted of all the near followers of Jesus Christ, but also, only thanks to his reason and presence of mind, all the acts of this sacred individual could form that result which, if it did not serve as the basis for the total destruction of the consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabapa in these unfortunate free-brain beings, yet it was, nevertheless, during 20 centuries the source of nourishment and inspiration for the majority of them in their desolate existence, and made it at least a little endurable. In order that you may better represent and make clear to yourself the genuine individuality of this Judas, and the significance of his manifestation for the future, I must first then inform you that when this sacred individual, Jesus Christ, intentionally actualized from above in a planetary body of a terrestrial being, completely formed himself for a corresponding existence, he decided to actualize the mission imposed on him from above through the way of enlightening the reason of these free-brained terrestrial beings by means of 12 different types of beings chosen from among them, and who were specially enlightened and prepared by him personally. And so, in the very heat of his divine activities, surrounding circumstances independent of him were so arranged that, not having carried out his intention, i.e., not having had time to explain certain cosmic truths and to give the required instructions for the future, he was compelled to allow the premature cessation of his planetary existence to be accomplished. He then decided, together with these 12 terrestrial beings intentionally initiated by him, to have recourse to the sacred sacrament Al-Muznushinu, the process of the actualization of which sacred sacrament was already well known to all of them, as they had already acquired in their presences all the data for its fulfillment, so that he should have the possibility, while he still remained in such a cosmic individual state, to finish the preparation begun by him for the fulfillment of the plan designed for actualization of the mission imposed on him from above. And so, my boy, when having decided on this, and being ready to begin the preliminary preparation required for this sacred sacrament, it then became clear that it was utterly impossible to do this, as it was too late. They were all already surrounded by beings called guards, and their arrest and everything that would follow from it was expected at any moment. And it was just here that this Judas, now a saint and formerly the inseparable and devoted helper of Jesus Christ, and who is hated and cursed owing to the naive non-reasonableness of the peculiar free-brained beings of your planet, manifested himself and rendered his great objective service for which terrestrial free-brained beings of all subsequent generations should be grateful. This wise, onerous and disinterestedly devoted manifestation taken upon himself consisted in this, that while in a state of desperation on ascertaining that it was impossible to fulfill the required preliminary procedure for the actualization of the sacred Al-Muzunishinu, this Judas, now a saint, leaped from his place and hurriedly said, "I shall go and do everything in such a way that you should have the possibility of fulfilling this sacred preparation without hindrance, and meanwhile set to work at once." Having said this, he approached Jesus Christ, and having confidentially spoken with him a little and receiving his blessing, hurriedly left. The others, indeed without hindrance, finished everything necessary for the possibility of accomplishing this sacred process Al-Muzunishinu. After what I have just said, you should now without any doubt understand how the free-brained beings of the two types indicated by me of the planet Earth, which has taken your fancy, have distorted for their various egoistic aims all the truths to such an extent that about this Judas, now a saint, thanks to whom alone such a blessed herb of tranquillity from their desolate existence had arisen and existed for them for 20 centuries, there has been crystallized in the presences of the beings of all subsequent generations such an unprecedented, unjust representation. I personally even think that if this Judas was presented in their holy writ as a type of this kind, then it may have been for this reason, that it was necessary for someone or other also belonging to the mentioned types to belittle in this way for a certain purpose the significance of Jesus Christ himself. And namely, he appeared to be so naive, so unable to feel and see beforehand, in a word, so unperfected that in spite of knowing and existing together with this Judas so long, he failed to sense and be aware that this immediate disciple of his was such a perfidious traitor, and that he was selling for 30 worthless pieces of silver.